I'm Alicia, and I did my ecological interactions on lichens and giant sequoia trees in Kings Canyon National Park. So as you can see here, this species of lichen, Lepraria incana, appears to be in the crustose form, and it's actually growing on burned trees. You can see it better on the left picture, but this tree is pretty charred. This tree on the right is pretty burned as well. You can't see it too well, but they are both burned trees, and they both seem to be being colonized pretty well by these lichens. Also, if we look at this slide, you can see two different species of lichens here. The middle species, the yellow species, is maritime sunburst lichens. On the right, that's Hypnogemnia physotes lichens. And I think on the far left, they're actually growing together on the same branch, which is really interesting. But overall, I pretty much observed the same trend throughout the entire park. I definitely saw a higher proportion of lichens growing on dead and or burned trees than I saw growing on live and unburned trees. So in my research, I found three different sources that were kind of in line with this topic. The first source was by Ekstrom and his colleagues. They basically found that the main point I got from it was that some species of lichens pretty much only grow on burned trees, but this was only conducted in Sweden, so the environment might be different in comparison to California. The second source came from Romanji and Greece. And it found that lichen recolonization on moderately burned and severely burned areas experienced significant increases in lichen cover, probably due to lack of competition for space on tree trunks that was wiped out by the burn. And the final source came from Miller and the other researchers. This was actually conducted in the Sierra Nevada, which was pretty close to home, and it found that mild fires have little to no impact on lichen communities, but large fires that destroy the forest canopies can impact lichen growth and success. And this study went into more depth. They explained that when you take away the canopy, basically the microclimate becomes hotter, drier, more exposed to sun. So that actually inhibits lichen growth. So I kind of took all of that information and applied it to my hypothesis. When I went, it was basically kind of snowing. It was cold. There was plenty of tree growth there and canopy cover. So even though there was burned trees there, it definitely was more of a mild burn. Taking from source 2, the burned trees definitely provided ample space for recolonization because there was a lack of competition after the burn. For source 1, it just basically established a relationship that in some parts of the world there is a dependence, I suppose, of lichen prosperity on burned trees. So all in all, that led me to my hypothesis that lichens in Kings Canyon National Park have more success growing on dead/burned sequoia trees than on unburned and live sequoia trees. So in the course of this, I devised an experiment. Ideally, the experiment would have 7 plots. 3 of the plots would be 5 square miles in size. It would only contain unburned live sequoia trees of any age. You would go on every day and remove fallen branches and trees. You prevent all forest fires, natural and anthropogenic. You would prevent all other ecological interactions for lichens, such as being eaten by animals. And then you would have 3 other plots, same size, but it would only contain burned or fallen sequoia trees. Again, you would prevent all forest fires. It may seem redundant because the trees are already burned, but the forest fires can impact lichens, kill them off, and that's another ecological interaction you wouldn't want to have. And then you will prevent all the other ecological interactions, such as the lichens being eaten by other animals. And then you would have a control plot, same size as the other plots, 5 square miles, but it would be in a randomly selected area in Kings Canyon National Forest. Ideally, it should also have a natural mix of burned and dead trees and unburned live trees, and you wouldn't prevent any ecological interactions. You would just let it be. It would kind of be like the area that I was in. There was pretty much an equal mix of burned and dead trees. As for a time frame, ideally it would be 1 year, and then after the year, you would measure lichen growth by weight, growth stage, and diameter in all plots after 1 year. So if the hypothesis is supported, what can we observe? We should observe a significant difference in weight, size, and life stage between the treatment groups. And if the hypothesis is supported, the treatment group with the burned and dead tree should have higher measurements overall. We can determine if this is significant by basically doing what we've been doing in class with the ANOVA tables and the p-values and all that good stuff. That will definitely tell us whether the data is significant or not. And if it is, this tells us that lichen growth can be correlated with whether or not it's on a dead or burned tree or on a live and unburned tree. We can also run further experiments as to why this is. In the first source that I mentioned in the previous slide, they actually found, not that they found, this is actually known knowledge, that burned trees that are still alive actually release certain chemicals that the lichens kind of thrive off of. And that's the reason why they kind of have that relationship with burned trees. There could be a similar relationship in the trees and with the trees in lichens in Kings Canyon National Forest that we can look into. We can also look into competition factors, and all these different variables that we can run tests on. And if there isn't a correlation, if there is no significant data, this simply means that there is no significant data that lichen growth is not impacted at all by whether or not it's on a burned tree and a dead tree or a live and a unburned tree. We could also run further tests on if dead and burned trees necessarily go together. What if it's just a burned tree and dead trees have nothing to do with it, and vice versa with the live and unburned trees. I would also like to clarify too, when it comes to the experiment, the treatments would be burned and dead trees, live and unburned trees, and the controls would be forest fires, other ecological interactions. The dependent variables would be lichen weight, diameter, size, lichen growth stage, and independent variables would be burned and dead trees and live and unburned trees.